Hey, Slater Crusaders, America's the greatest country in the world. Glad you're here. Coming up at the end of the show, we're going to talk with Lee Greenwood, who is a super interesting guy, and he's got this new homeschool curriculum, which is pretty cool, so we'll talk to him coming up a little bit later. First, I want to report this from the paper of record in America. The headline is, Governor Unveils Innovative 37-Step Plan to Reopen the State Over the Next 10 Years, which is very exciting. And the article talks about how other states have announced they're going to wait about 10 to 15 years to judge the effectiveness of that 37-part plan before they start releasing their own plan. So that's where we're at right now. That's Babylon Bee. It's a joke, but it's kind of real life. This is the governor of Massachusetts in the Boston Globe. Charlie Baker grudgingly unveiled a plan to reopen the state's economy. He wouldn't say when the four-phase plan will begin, how long the phases will last, what businesses will be affected, and what restrictions they'll face. But he did give them names. We have the names now, which is great news. We have 4 phases. The first, start, then cautious, then vigilant, followed by the new normal. So there you got the... So I am breathing a sigh of relief that we have a plan. Well, not so much a plan as much as names for the plan. And you can see these bureaucrats sitting around the table high-fiving each other. Like, oh, great job with the names, guys. Really, really good work for the last 2.5 months. I have a, perhaps the opposite is true, that I would like to present to you, see what you think. What's the common belief? The common belief out there is that we did not shut down the economy soon enough. We did it too late. We shut down the economy too late. That's the criticism from Trump, right? He didn't shut down flights from China soon enough, even though when he did, he was called a racist for doing so. Now, one of the themes of the show is perhaps the opposite is true. Now, it doesn't mean the opposite is always true, but it is a lot. It's a lot more than you think. And it's not only slightly different than what people are thinking, like the opposite of what people are saying is true. So that's why we always ask, perhaps the opposite is true. So if the statement is, we shut down the country too late, what's the opposite of that? We shut down the country too soon? Did we stop flights from China too soon? Just think about that. You always just consider it. I don't think so. Not flights from China. I think that was done at the right time. No one would have done it any sooner. So that's good. Okay, let's talk about the country. Parts of the country. Do we shut it down too soon? Maybe not New York City. New York City, Washington State, California. I think those needed to be, stopped. The spread needed to be stopped when it did. So that's probably still accurate. But the rest of the country, maybe we shut the rest of the country down too soon. Maybe they would have been better off not shutting down and letting more of the virus come into their cities and towns, obviously still staying under the healthcare capacity line, but to help with more herd immunity up front, like a larger dose up front in that first wave. I don't know, maybe. That's a little tricky. Let me throw this one instead. Maybe rural America didn't need to lock down yet because that pesky human nature again. You only get one, politicians. You get one 2-month lockdown. That's it. Remember, 40 days. Quarantine's Italian for 40 days. You get one 40-day lockdown. That's all that your constituents can handle. That's all that anyone can bear. That's all the economy could bear. You get one of them. And maybe you used your quarantine card too soon. Right, like governor, here's your one 40-day lockdown card. Use it wisely. Don't use it too soon. So if you're the governor of Nebraska or you're the mayor of Fargo, don't use it just because New York City's using theirs. Right time for New York City to use it, absolutely. They probably should have quarantined the whole city to stop it from spreading around the world, around the rest of the country. Cuomo called it the European flu the other day, or the European virus. What are you kidding me? Because now the argument is, oh, well, that strain happened to come from Europe. All right, if you're going to play that game, then the rest of the country should call it the New York City virus. Because it almost all came from New York City. But anyway, Fargo. New York City used their quarantine card when they should have. That doesn't mean it was the right time for you to use it. Maybe imagine it like this. Imagine it like each city or each town is a person going into battle, Braveheart style, right? So we're all like in this mob. Every city and town's in this mob, and we're in battle, and we're running into the battle together. But everyone has one bullet. You got one bullet. That's it. You got the one quarantine bullet. That's it. And we're going to battle against the virus. We got one bullet, and we all fired it at the same time. And now we're out of bullets. Now, maybe it made sense for New York and California and Washington, who were in the front of the battle, right? Because they're in the front of the spear, tip of the spear. So they're going to shoot their one bullet because it made sense to them. But every other town and city in the back of the charging army, they shot it, and now they're out of bullets. Because you got to do it again? Maybe you did it too soon. This is from the great Tyler Cohen, economist. Someone sent him this email. The email says, the smaller town I'm in was never hit hard, and therefore most people are somewhere on the spectrum between COVID's a bad flu and you should wash your hands to pick whatever conspiracy theory you want, pandemic. People do not believe in the severity of the virus. Not one family we know is social distancing. The ICU never got overrun. The only apocalypse to arrive is an economic one. And this is the fundamental point. Most people's only pain and sadness stems from loss of job and security and future, not from sickness and death. People here don't work for big companies or the government. So the thought is maybe these smaller towns should have only locked down, considering human nature, should have only locked down when it really mattered. They should have held on to their lockdown card because it's going to be really hard to do it again. So instead of every governor shutting down so soon, their posture should have been more like William Wallace. By the way, if you haven't seen Braveheart in the last, do you have to watch it once a year? I think to maintain your man card, I think you have to watch it once a year. I may be coming up on the year mark. Certainly every 2 years, you have to watch Braveheart. So hopefully you remember the scene. But they're going to battle, and the invading army, the army's coming at William Wallace, and he goes, hold, remember, hold, and they cut to all the other guys and they're like, are we gonna do this or what? Hold, and then he finally says to attack. Or William Prescott, Battle of Bunker Hill, he says, don't shoot until you see the white of their eyes. I think certain areas maybe needed to wait longer, understanding the limits of human behavior to use their quarantine card. Makes sense? The first lockdown, looking back on it, not a really hard convince, actually, for people, right? I think everyone was like, hey, we got a really bad virus coming. Could kill a lot of people. Exponential growth, whole thing, maybe 2 million dead. We need to lock down. And I think most people were understandably, and I think rightfully, like, oh, geez, wow, this is new. So, okay, yeah, let's do, I mean, we're all in this together. Let's do our part and we'll shut down. And everyone was like on board for a while. That party's over. And it's gonna be hard to convince people to do it again. And you hear like Fauci and all these others talking about a second wave, right? So they're trying to get in front of that because they know how hard it is to convince people that we need to do it again, especially in areas where they never really even hit the first time. You gotta do it again? I don't think so. So here's Cohen. He said, this is one reason why I am skeptical about models of epidemiology and economics, he's an economist, that do not consider political sustainability. That's his way of saying human nature. We've talked about human nature all the time. He uses that as political sustainability, same thing. I am by no means sure that the claims in this post are correct, but they could be correct. And a model that does not consider political sustainability won't even pick up these factors as concerns. It'll simply indicate that a lockdown should happen as quickly as possible. But that was perhaps one of our big mistakes, namely to shut down many of the less dense parts of America before their problems were sufficiently acute. thereby rendering the whole program less sustainable. Very interesting. I remember going back and forth about this in the first month or so, about should we only lock down certain places or the whole country? My knee-jerk reaction, I think because I'm a conservative in like federalism and localism and local government, I think my first knee-jerk instinct was, oh, this should be done like on a local piecemeal basis. But then Bill Gates came in and he was on the you got to shut down everywhere camp, and he made a convincing argument, right? Someone from New York City goes here, or that person goes here, people travel and spread it. Like, I get it. I don't know. I feel, I knew Bill Gates obviously was going to be influential, and I think everyone kind of went with that, and obviously the media did. So every place shut down. And where a state didn't, right, where Georgia held off, everyone in the media called the Georgia governor a murderer, right? So that's a lot of pressure to maybe shut down before it was the right time to shut down. I'll share the analogy again. I want to go because we got Lee Greenwood coming up. But I believe we needed a D-Day invasion, and we did it. Great job. We did the carpet bombing. We did the full boots on the ground. We flattened the curve. Wonderful work. Now it's time for a strategy change. We need a little more special ops, guerrilla warfare. Precision is the name of the game now. And part of precision is timing. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. Again, we got Lee Greenwood coming up. Our Facebook, or not Facebook app, our app on your smartphone. Please download it. It's free. It's awesome. Every show's on demand, right there for you. Watch live. It's great and totally free. So a friend of mine gave me this insight yesterday, and I want to forward it to you. He sees a new aspect of classism showing itself. So we always have tribes, and there's always dividing lines that separate us into groups. They always have, always will. The question is, at any given moment, what will those dividing lines be? All right, right? What are the factions that we will create, and what are they going to be based on? So we got race, politics, religion, income, social status, geography, the geographic location. There's a lot of that in the beginning, like oh, the South isn't doing what they need to do, right? There's a lot of that. Geographyism. Language, customs, right? So anyway, these dividing lines exist all the time at different levels, right? Depending what the issue of the moment happens to be. In the beginning of this all, when the virus, the whole thing started here, the dividing lines didn't really correlate with party affiliation that much. Now it's much more aligned with party affiliation. People went back to their, people on the left went back to their, I believe the opposite of Trump mindset. And Trump supporters fell in line more with whatever Trump said. And even like bringing Trump flags to open up the economy rallies. I don't get that at all. First of all, as a massive Second Amendment supporter, I don't understand why you're bringing your AR-15 to these rallies. That makes no sense at all. Why are you doing that? Like literally, what is in your, what is that for? It doesn't make any sense. But also, I don't understand bringing a Trump flag. You thinking that we should open up the economy has nothing to do with Trump or your previous support of him, your current support of him, or anything he's saying or not saying. I don't know why you do it, but it signals, it's a sign that the dividing lines are falling right back into the old grooves of politics. Now, there's a new strain on top of that, and that's elitism, classism, which has always been a part of the anti-Trump vibe as well. Right? But you see it now with certain expressions, certain mindless expressions, like follow the guidelines. I heard this one, and it's always with the like, oh, you're not following the guidelines? Okay. Typical. And I'm like, what guidelines? Like, what are you even talking about? You don't even know what the guidelines are. There's no guidelines. Every state, every county, every city, every town has different phases and recommendations and orders and mandates and stay-at-home orders versus state of emergencies versus emergency health orders. Like, no one even knows what anyone's talking about. There aren't even any guidelines, but there's this elitist mentality, looking down on people who don't follow them. It's like this old, like Victorian, like looking down on the masses for not following social etiquette. Oh, you're not wearing a mask, huh? Okay, not wearing a mask at the beach. Typical of a lowly fella like you. Probably a Donald J. Trump supporter, too. Yep. Just as I thought, not following the guidelines. It's like, shut up. You hear these empty lines a lot. We're all in this together. I love that one. Notice I've never said that ever. I've never said we're all in this together. I hear that line, someone says, oh, we're all in this together. Usually it's a celebrity in a mansion. And I think, no, we're not. We're definitely not all in this together. What are you talking about? Yesterday we talked about the LA County Health Director who her undergrad, sorry, I just gotta keep saying this. Her undergrad was in community studies from Santa Cruz, UC Santa Cruz, and her doctorate is social work. She has a doctorate in social work, but you must refer to her as a doctor. Doctorate in social work. She makes $500,000 a year. Pretty sure she's not gonna be taking a pay cut because, we're all in this together. She and the factory worker, the blue collar worker, the business owner who she won't let go back to work while she's still getting her paycheck, not in this together. Neil Ferguson, the Dr. Lockdown in England, he's the guy from Imperial College who ramped up all this rhetoric with his models that were way off. He broke lockdown to sleep with his mistress. And he resigned, like their task force, the British task force, he resigned in disgrace. You and him were never in this together. He didn't even follow his own guidelines, right? He'd be the guy like, oh, you gotta follow the guidelines. He didn't even follow the guidelines. Be careful of mindless phrases. I'm gonna be more aware of them. I'm gonna write them down and share with them every day as I hear them. And I'm tempted to say them, right? Because that's how it works. People say them all the time and you hear it and then it gets in your brain and then you start to say it without even knowing that you're saying. Spike is one of them. You see it all the time. Cases are spiking. Notice they're only ever spiking in red states. They're only ever spiking in Republican states. Hotspot. What's a hotspot? You hear the word hotspot? You ever said the word hotspot? Oh, we got a new hotspot. What's a hotspot? I mean this generally. Like if you're a newspaper article. By the way, if you're in a blue state and cases are going up, they're increasing. But if it's a red state, they're spiking. Right? So what is the definition of something spiking? What's the percentage increase that you would need in order for it to be a spike? And what's a hotspot? Like, is there a certain number of cases that make something a hotspot versus not a hotspot? We just got to define our terms. I don't like empty words, and there's a ton of them here. Now, have you seen Jerry Seinfeld's new stand-up special on Netflix? You have to watch it. It's fantastic. I'm only halfway through, but it's classic Seinfeld, and it's amazing. So we saw this yesterday when we were watching. He did this whole rant about meaningless empty words. Here it is.
We like to give our thoughts, our comments, our opinions. Sometimes we run out of opinions. We make them up. It is what it is a very popular opinion statement. Nowadays, I'm sure some idiot said it to you today. You can't get through a day without somebody going, well, it is what it is. Why are you alive? To just say air words that fill the room with meaningless sounds. I'd rather someone blew clear air into my face than said it is what it is to me one more time. Just come up to me and go, because I get the same data from that.
There's so many of those with this whole COVID thing. Here's what I noticed the other day, and this is one I got stuck with. The new goodbye, you know what the new goodbye is? Stay safe. Have you said that? I caught myself saying it the other day, and I was like, I don't like that. I'm not gonna say that anymore. Stay safe. I don't know what I'm gonna say. Probably just goodbye, have a good day, like normal. Stay safe. I don't like it. Just air words. But smart people like to trick themselves and others, and trick others into thinking they're smart by using a lot of those words. Read any academic paper in the pseudosciences, and they're not for human consumption. Just a bunch of error words. Same thing here. This is why the people on the left hate Trump, the elites in D.C., the swamp, because they see Trump as a blowhard from Queens. He's not distinguished enough. A blowhard who won't listen to them, by the way. These people in think tanks in D.C., their entire careers are based on the idea that their opinions matter, right? The career bureaucrats, the think tanks, the experts in D.C. And Trump came in and doesn't listen to any of them ever, nor should he, most of these people. And they resent him forever for it. The media is the same thing. That's why they can't stop being offended all the time, because he doesn't respect them. And the media, they've had years and years of we're the fourth estate. We're in the Constitution. We're protected, and he doesn't respect us like we deserve to be respected. And they can't help themselves. And they keep falling into his traps because of it. Their pride takes over, which is something we talked a lot about yesterday. Anyway, keep an eye out for more instances of elitism rearing its ugly head. There's a city versus country vibe to it as well, right? You have a lot, which makes sense. They all kind of correlate with each other: city, country, upper class, lower class, wealthier, poorer, and that's why you get a lot of people in the city, wealthier, like, oh, you in Atlanta, you're not following the guidelines in Georgia and Tennessee. You're not following the guidelines. Like, give me a break. I gotta go. Let me add one more bit of nuance to this, because we're all in this together. So let me add some nuance. This is from the great VDH, Victor Davis Hanson. He said, in a nutshell, as he wrote an article, it's called The War Between Experience and Credentials. He said, in a nutshell, the divide reflects the ancient opposition between empiricism, so things you can touch, feel, look at, and abstraction, or a more charitable common sense versus scientific knowledge. When the two are combined and balanced, then knowledge advances. When they're not, both are deprived of the wisdom of the other. Unfortunately, in the present crisis, we have listened more to the university modeler than to a numbers-crunching accountant. The latter, the accountant, I hate former and latter. I've never liked the use of that word. Just say it again. The latter may not understand Banach manifolds, but at least he knows you cannot rely on basic equations and formulas if your denominator is inaccurate and your numerator is sometimes equally unreliable. He's talking about the fatality rate, right? The fatality rate, which is like deaths from COVID divided by cases of COVID. Now, an epidemiologist may look at that and be like, oh, well, here's the deaths, here's the cases. But a numbers crunching accountant will be like, we don't really know the deaths, and we certainly don't know the cases. Now, the accountant may not know what the Banach manifold is. I don't even know what that is. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right? But at least the accountant has enough common sense to say, you can't even really calculate that properly. So you need both in order to do this properly. Internet coronavirus meters feign scientific accuracy with the hourly stream of precise data. But those without degrees wondered why such metrics even listed China, whose data is fanciful, or why the number of cases is listed when it hinges entirely on the hit and miss idiosyncratic testing of various states and nations. You need both, right? You need the super smart epidemiologist, but then you also need a little dose of the common sense from the everyman to be like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. I like this line from VDH. He said, fighter pilots cannot design planes. It's true, right? Fighter pilots can't design planes. But engineers can't either without the practical input of the pilots. You need both. But we could all do better off without empty, nonsensical sayings and without an elitism looking down on any group of people. True story. Mike Slater. Spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. So this may be a sign of when the media is going to start changing their tune when it comes to balancing a virus and the economy. So quick background, the media has two driving forces. The first is we have to be opposed to anything Trump says at all times. That's the first. And the second is we have to assume the absolute worst of everything that he says. So on the first point, being opposed to anything he says, if Trump said in the very beginning, HCQ, wasn't going to work, today, still, you would hear nonstop all the promising effects of HCQ on COVID patients. You can get updates every day on the latest HCQ trials and developments from hospitals across the country and around the world, all with the rosiest of spins on them. And it would all be framed as Trump, who's not a doctor. That's my favorite. They do that all the time. They'll say, like, Trump says, comma, without evidence. Like, they put it and then comma and then go. And my favorite one of that is Trump, comma, who's not a doctor, has downplayed a drug that could save millions of lives. That's if Trump said HCQ's not that great. But instead, Trump said HCQ could work, and it's promising, and we'll see. So the media, right away, knee-jerk against it at all costs. We can give a million examples, you know it. On assuming the worst, the drinking bleach is the perfect example of that one. Trump said, I'll never forget this one. Trump said, hey, listen, maybe there's some disinfectants that can be injected into the body to maybe kill the virus. That's really interesting. I look forward to hearing more about that. He looks over to the doctors, like, you guys are going to do some studies on that. That could be something really interesting. Oh, Trump told everyone to drink bleach. You're like, what? What? No. This happened the other day. There was some reporter, like a CBS News reporter, asked him a question. And he said, I don't know, why don't you ask China? And the reporter, she's Asian, she said, oh, excuse me? Why did you tell me I should ask China? Why me specifically should I ask China? Making it seem like the president was being racist towards the Asian reporter. And like, why should you? I don't know, you're the one who asked the stupid question. You asked China, that's why I'm telling you should ask China. You asked the dumb question to begin with. Oh, you're being racist because I'm Asian, blah, blah. Like that's, it's always assuming the worst at all times. It's the media's MO. The only way the media will change their tune is when they start getting fired from the economic catastrophe that this all is. We're starting to see parts of that. Condé Nast, the magazine, they furloughed 100 people. They laid off another 100. They owned Vanity Fair, Vogue, and The New Yorker. I think those are their three. So you're going to hear more stories of this. Like that's a smaller, Condé Nast, it's a big company, right? But the big hit of the day is on the TV stations, the networks. The contracts, apparently, that were signed by advertisers, they say that on May 1st, so you got to pay, all the advertisers had to pay in full up until May 1st. And on May 1st, the advertisers could cut back their future commitments by up to 50% in the third quarter. So GM, Pepsi, General Mills, among others, are the big companies to do just that. That's a ton of money. They're thinking somewhere between $1 and $1.5 billion in just the third quarter, let alone what's coming up in the fourth quarter. Now, I don't know how much that will affect the news division specifically, right? Because, ratings are pretty good on, the cable news, I think, I would imagine, right? Ratings are up there. But I'm pretty certain that if Comcast is going to have to lay off hundreds of people at NBC because they took a $400 million hit to their advertising revenue this quarter, pretty sure the head of Comcast is going to knock on the door of the head of MSNBC and tell them to maybe change their tune a little bit about needing to open up the economy. So look out for more examples of that because it's all going to be about money. We're at a point now in all this. I don't know when this happened. Maybe 2 weeks ago, actually, probably. I've had to pick a day. Maybe about 2 weeks ago, but we're definitely at the point now where no arguments will work on anyone. It's just like no one will change their mind about the virus and no one will change their mind about the shutdown until they're directly affected. Nothing else will work. No cleverly or well-worded argument is going to convince one person to switch sides. It's just not happening. It's only going to be a personal, if it affects you personally. And it goes both ways, right? So for me personally, my radio job, specifically, I'm on salary. I lost money from a bunch of advertisers who left because of this all. But for the most part, I'm on salary. So I've been minimally affected financially. if I lost my radio job, if iHeartRadio was like, we're firing all of our hosts or whatever, I would certainly be much more rabidly like, we got to open up now. And so would everyone in the media. Now, I'm actually for opening up, so that's not the best example. But if someone in the media were saying, no, we got to stay closed down for until we have a vaccine. Well, easy for them to say until they lose their job. And I guarantee you, one day they'll be covering the protesters who want to open up the economy as like a bunch of rubes, a bunch of losers, right? The elitist attitude we just talked about. They're like, oh, look at these guys want to shut down the economy. They don't understand the severity of the virus. They lose their job. That next day, they'll be back at that protest calling for to open up the economy as well. That's how they change their tune. And flip it around too with doctors and nurses, right? With their healthcare background, right? They're very like stay home, stop the spread. If they get laid off from their hospital, as tens of thousands have, then they're going to start considering other variables that are at play. And I should say now on the flip side, people who say it's no big deal and saying we need to open up faster, if their parents die, if their spouse gets really, really sick, then they're going to start saying, hey, everyone should really start to take this a little more seriously. It's all about personal experience at this point. The dividing lines, the tribes have been set. No way you can change anyone's mind now until there's a personal experience. Goes for both of us. Hey, you want to take a break? We'll come back. True story. True story. Mike Slater, spread the word. Hey, Slater Crusaders. The thing we've most been looking forward to on the show today is to talk to our next guest, who I don't even know how to introduce him. 35 singles on the Billboard charts, 20 albums. Lee Greenwood. Mr. Greenwood, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Good morning.
Singer, songwriter, author, I don't know, all the things. And I'm grateful for this new product you have. It's a resource for homeschool families, but also just for everyone. So tell us what we have here first.
Well, the children's illustrated book is entitled Proud to Be an American. That's sort of like a co-title to the song that I wrote in 1983 called God Bless the USA. I thought it was important that because we taught our kids to read when they were like a year old, you hold a book in front of a child sitting on a rocking chair, and they're fascinated by pictures, but not just photographs. It's more about illustrations. For some reason, they're more captured by animation than they are real life at first. And it's fascinating for them because you teach them to read a word or two, and then they'll read the word or two back to you, and then eventually a sentence. But our kids were reading fluently before they were 3, just because we taught them every day. But the tools that we had, of course, were Goodnight Moon and, some of the really childlike things as a baby. But as we got a little bit more complicated, we realized we didn't really have a patriotic book that we could read to them. And, of course, what a great tool to have my own song put in lyric and then show them pictures of my upbringing and what I felt was important in life.
I'll be a testimony to the book. We've owned the book for about 3 years now. It's a fantastic book. But what you guys have here is more than even just that for parents and grandparents. What else do you guys have?
Well, of course, the tool itself, as I go through the story, and I'm going to produce a video here, probably like an evening read for like Dolly Parton has with her book, Imagination Library, in a way that I can actually talk through a blog or through a Facebook Live performance of reading the story. And with that in mind, each one of the lyrics applies to something that we're facing today. Any crisis, as a matter of fact. And you got to start realizing what's important all of a sudden. It's the country itself. It's the military that fight, for our freedom. And I've been on numerous USO tours and realized what that sacrifice is. And I know you know as well, Mike, that soldiers don't get a break. I mean, they're working on 24/7 every day that they're in uniform. And so that was important to put in the book as well. There's also a download at the back of the book. You can actually download the song once you have the possession of the book. I don't know if you did that or not, but you can play the song for the kid as well.
The book's called Proud to Be an American, Lee Greenwood, and the homeschool resource, you can go to excellenceineducation.com and search for it right there, and you get the whole set. Lee, if you don't mind, I want to talk about you growing up on a farm in Sacramento. I did not grow up on a farm, but I'm working through understanding the importance of getting your hands dirty of living in the country, of growing up in that type of lifestyle. So if you don't mind, can you speak to that? What are some of the virtues and principles that you learned growing up on a farm?
Well, let me back up and listen. I'll tell you how I got there. And that is my father joined the Navy right after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. And my mother was stuck at home with 2 children. My sister's a little bit older than I am. She now lives in Idaho. And I live in Tennessee, so we're quite a ways apart, but we talk all the time. We talk about the past and the future. And when I remember very little about the early years between 1 and 6, I do remember being moved to the farm because my mother and father got divorced because of the war. And it's not uncommon that soldiers face that. My mother had 3 jobs. She was a comptometer operator for Standard Oil, a cleric for Southern Pacific, and played piano in nightclubs in the 40s when it wasn't even allowed for women to be in nightclubs. And so they kind of waived that rule because they really didn't have a man that could play that kind of piano. So yeah. I was benefited by that. So at the farm, we were sharecroppers. My grandparents, Thomas and Edna Jackson, took charge of my life and my sister's until she graduated high school, and I was left alone there for a while. Music came really easy, but also did baseball. And so I was pursuing both at the same time all the way through my teen years, and working on the farm as well with my grandparents and understanding the values of working with the earth. Now, my grandparents worked very hard, but had very little to show for it because as a sharecropper, we didn't own any land. If you don't own land, eventually that's going to burn out. And so they had to change from what they did into building apartments. By the time I was 13 or 14, I was working in nightclubs at that time, making my own money, buying my own clothes. And when I left home at 16, I graduated high school. I went straight to Nevada. But I took those roots with me, and your neighbor is as important to you as your own family. And when they require you to come and help, you immediately jump to that cause. They come and help you. I remember sitting on the front porch, stringing beans, husking corn, doing the things that you do, working in the fields. I would follow the plow when my grandfather would plow the field and just kind of watch the ants and how they would kind of be disrupted by the ground. And I got really interested in growing plants and watering trees. We had all kinds of fruit trees and stuff that after I left home, I realized how expensive it was to buy those in a store. I'm like, wow, that stuff's expensive,
What do you, I love those stories. I love that imagery. What do you learn from that as a boy walking behind the plow, watching the ants come out of the disrupted dirt, right? What do you get from that? How does that affect your soul?
Well, it certainly did because I guess I had a big, vivid imagination, and I would, when I come home from school, we had a grape arbor that went from our trailer. I was raised on a trailer and went over the top of the trailer to a dove cage. We had white sacred doves. I don't know why we had them, but we did. It was my grandmother's passion. And the grapes, the Thompson seedless grapes, would drop through the grape arbor and just below enough where I could grab a bunch of them and pull them down to the ground and eat those. And so you realize that stuff that's newly grown out of the ground. I'd take a salt shaker out in the yard, pick up an onion and a radish and put some on it and eat it right there. The figs, you could reach up and grab a fig out of the tree and eat it. So I became very familiar with the fact that you could grow your own food. So if there was a crisis or anything, you just had to have a garden. And a lot of people do that in the rural areas, not possible in cities, unfortunately. But it's a good way to keep in touch with the ground, with the earth itself.
Yes.
And I think that was the best lesson I learned, is that never lose touch with the roots of the earth, of what ground produces and how hard farmers work. And lots of times it's not about money. It's about just, it's getting in touch with yourself and your soul.
Yeah, there's something spiritual about that, about the earth and about getting your hands dirty. It's an incredible phenomenon. What'd you learn from your grandparents? What lessons did they teach you?
Well, first of all, the value of friendship, family. Didn't really value money much because we didn't have any. And of course, when I left home, I started making my own living at 16 or 17 in Nevada. I was in Nevada for 20 years and never went home again. So I was on my own, and I learned how to make a living. At the very early age, I guess I was about 12, my grandmother would allow me to go out and pick sweet pea flowers, bunch them in little bunches with a rubber band, and pick fruit. We had little baskets I could make out of straw, and pick grapes and figs, peaches, and I'd take them down to the local Chinese market in my basket on my bicycle and sell them. So I learned how to be an entrepreneur early
Wow.
on. Yeah, and that's an interesting lesson. And then, of course, they allowed me to play piano at night. And so in as much as I could get my farm chores done, milking the cows, gathering the eggs, whatever I had to do, water the fruit trees, I was allowed to play the piano at night. And it came easy. I mean, I would play things I would hear just on the radio. We had one of those old radios with 2 knobs on it, you know. And I would memorize what I heard and play it on the piano. So my grandparents knew that I had enough talent to probably make it on my own.
Wow. I love when you said, my grandma would allow me to. That's interesting. Why'd you put it like that, right? Would allow me to, as opposed to made me go do these things.
Well, you have to realize that in that era, of course, it was the 40s and 50s, that if you were pursuing to be a musician, they would call you a B flat. And that was not an enduring term. And so if I was going to become a musician, I had to take care of something else first. And that was my schoolwork, make sure I got good grades. And they were average. I wasn't a great student. All my A's were in athletics and music. Go figure. But I had C's and B's in history and English. And yet I turned out to be pretty good as a speller and as a writer. So I guess it just came naturally, probably from my parents. But my grandmother's favorite music, and you have to go back to hear that. You're too young to know this, Mike, but they used to have a 78 record that was made by Hart's Mountain. And Hart's Mountain was a feed company for birds. And so my grandmother would put this 78 record on in our little turntable and listen to the canaries sing. That was her favorite record. So if I was going to play music on it was just like little harmonies, you know, in the background with strings or whatever. And then the birds would like chirp, beep, 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 you know. So I would go to the piano and play. So she'd say, okay, I'm going to stop the record and I'm going to allow you to play, but you better be good.
Wow, amazing. That's amazing, like, to just watch a timeline of your life from that to, you know, what you become. Like that, like the beginnings of that. That's such a beautiful image. Let me jump to... Go ahead.
You know, from the early days
please.
My mother gave me a saxophone early on because I didn't want to take lessons from her. She was in and out of marriages and not home very much. I didn't know my father until I was 14. So basically it was just my grandparents. And I think my grandmother told my mother that he's not going to play piano if you try to teach him. And so she brought me a saxophone and I took to that like a duck to water. So my grandparents said, well, you probably need to get some lessons. And so she enrolled me in a summer program when I was 13 years old to go to the local school and get summer lessons on my saxophone. Well, the very first day I got there, and I have an alto saxophone. It wasn't too heavy. I could actually carry it on my handlebars. And I went to class the first day, and and I'd already been playing melodies off the radio. I already picked that up. And so the teacher said, you have to play this note this certain way, and I could play it a different way. And I said, well, I don't need to play it that way. I said, I can actually make the same sound. And he said, well, you can't do it. So the next day I went home and I took my saxophone out of the case and I put my baseball mitt in the case. And instead of going to the music store, I went to the baseball park. And we met a bunch of kids over there and I played baseball all summer. And they never knew that I never went to class. I kept getting better on the saxophone and I became an all-star baseball player.
Nice. You guys did both in one summer. Perfect. That's funny.
There you go.
Do you ever get sick of talking about God Bless the USA? And do you ever get sick playing it?
No and no.
Do you get sick being identified? Like, I can imagine some actors who maybe get frustrated that they're typecast, right?
Well,
so are you ever like, oh, like this is I'm more than just this one song?
Well, God Bless USA, of course, grew organically. And I can't tell you how pleased and proud I am that I had a tool that could serve as unification for the United States, for the citizens of America. Yeah. And it's had several levels. Certainly after the Gulf War, after Katrina, and then after the attack on America in 2001. And there were moments, when suddenly I was thrust into the limelight because of the one song. And I've sang it in many different places for more than 8 different presidents, 5 at one time, twice at the Reagan Library and at Texas A&M. And then, of course, 2 inaugurations for 2 different presidents at the Lincoln Memorial. So
Crazy.
You put all that together and you'd say, well, all you live is God bless the USA. No, that's not true. USA is an umbrella over my career. But you look back at my discography, and I've had over 10 #1 country hits, 30 albums to my credit. So it's not an umbrella. And if I put it that way, I don't need protection from my artistry by one song. It identifies me. The only regret I have is maybe I didn't write Hotel California, or it's like, if you like bigger songs, but there's nothing bigger than God Bless the USA. Not just in my
there's
career,
not.
In the whole country. There's nothing bigger than that.
Yeah, it's amazing that you wrote something. You created a thing that is embedded in American culture. Hotel California is like a good song that people will forget. Like, people will forget that song. Like, people in my generation may not even know what it is. But everyone's, at least for many decades, if not centuries, people will know God Bless the USA. Like, that's pretty wild. Like, no one does that. Who does things that last for centuries? Very few people.
It's amazing for me and my family. Of course, I've been married to Kim for 28 years, and we have these 2 wonderful sons. Dalton, our old boy, is now at Vanderbilt getting a PhD in cancer research. He was valedictorian of his high school. His undergrad was at Washington and Lee. And our younger son, 21, is a Chancellor Scholar, not to be outdone, with a perfect science score, perfect SAT in high school, now 3rd-year music student at TCU, and pursuing a writing and musical career. He plays great piano, sings great guitar. So that's the kid that's following.
Look at the legacy. Yeah, the legacy you made for your family, too. So we have to run. I got one last question for you, if you don't mind.
Okay.
When you wrote it, did you know it was going to be a hit? And did anyone say no? Like, did any executives, were they ever like, this is no good, or this won't work, or anything like that?
Well, both are the opposite. Number one, the first album it was on was You Got a Good Love Coming, a 1985 production from MCA, which we produced a video, which was quite expensive at the time because CMT didn't have any videos. And You Got a Good Love Coming featured Patrick Duffy from the cast of Dallas, who was a friend of mine, as a cameo. I thought it was a really good song. And for the first time, my producer, Jerry Crutchfield, and I took that album to Los Angeles at the request of Irving Azoff. And we played it for him, and he's the one made the call to make that a single. I would never have intended USA to be a single over my current career, which was love songs and typical country lyrics. USA was a diversion, could have been a mistake, but as you found out, it was not.
No, Ken. Wow. And last question, we really got to go, like 30 seconds. I'm just always curious about the art craft here. Did you write it and then write the music, or did you do music first and then put lyrics into it?
I wrote the entire song, with the exception of a couple of cities, in my bus, because I had a piano in my bus traveling from gig to gig. I was doing 300 days a year on the road. And so when I took it home to my producer, we kind of worked out the cities from Detroit to Houston and New York, LA, of course, because of the population centers. But Motown was a creative part, was an economic boom at that time, and Houston because of the oil. And once I got that down, it all came together about the same time, and I went in the studio and just played it with the piano.
How long did it take you to write?
30 minutes.
Amazing. Amazing how that works. Mr. Greenwood, I could talk to you forever, and I'm so grateful for your time. Everyone go buy the book. We actually have 2. My kids ripped it, so we had to get another one. We got 2 of them, but that's how important it was. We ripped it and had to get a new one. Proud to be an American by Lee Greenwood. If you go to the website, Excellence in Education, there's a whole curriculum behind it with a bunch of other resources as well for parents and grandparents. Mr. Greenwood, appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you very much, Mike. Stay safe.
Thank you, too. Mike Slater Show. Spread the word.